Allegedly. So unique, once in a lifetime model, which means it's not about the model, it's not about me, it's about what it can do for you, your practice, and your clients, your patients. Because it's elemental and unified, it's accessible. So we're going to get into all this. Many of you may not know the official white paper is published on PsycArchive and Zenodo. That's ZENODO.org. And I recommend you get out a pen and paper, and we're going to get after it. I'm just checking my time. Perfect. All right. So UBM comes with a bold promise because it's elemental, because it's unified. You can far more quickly troubleshoot client challenges and lead them to better results with a single model. You don't have to piece together multiple frameworks and practices and therapies. UBM is broad, it's elemental, just like the tree of a trunk. We talk about behavioral science and psychology and all their branches, dozens and dozens of branches. The fundamental question is, where's the trunk? And I'm not saying it, behavioral science would tell you it doesn't exist. Well, I'll explain why, as I've learned. This is hardly an epiphany. This isn't a one-week project. It's not an overnight epiphany. It is the culmination of 20 years, and it benefits you. So we'll get into some quick background. We'll understand behavior just so we're baselining. We're on the same page. Then we'll get into the behavior ecosystem, what UBM is, and we'll go over some challenges and best practices, tips, and that's it. Next steps for those of you who are interested. So the backstory. Many of you may know this, some of you may not, and this reminds me to slow down a sec and say, because I'm always making the presumption you're joining a webinar, you probably got a link from me. If you don't know, my name is Martin Grunberg, Grunburg, Grunberg. The reason I say it like that, if you misspell it, you end up with the Fed chair or something like that. So yeah, 35, premature midlife crisis. I set a really big goal. It's less about the story and more about the process that I trip upon. So to achieve this 32-mile paddle, something I talked about when I was 17 and didn't commit to till I was 35. 32-mile, excuse me, 32-mile paddle from Catalina Island to Manhattan Beach. Still got the morning voice. So I complete it, and then I'm curious. I'm curious enough to test it again, and I begin taking notes. I followed a practice that would ultimately become the first published habits to goals methodology, meaning not following a to-do list. Why is this worth sharing? I'm not trying to pat myself on the back. I'm trying to share with you that you're not wasting time. There is a precedent as we move toward the behavior ecosystem and the unified behavior model. There is a precedent here. So I publish this methodology. I get invited to the United Arab Emirates to share this. For some reason, this is new because it's not following a to-do list. Lifehacker picks it up. This is just background context, credibility, call it what you will. I'm trying to move through it quickly. I even tested it with an Ironman. I didn't own running shoes or road bike. And here I get to cross the finish line with my two daughters and niece. So the practice works, then I start coaching.
Habits. For example, say your goal is to run.
This is CNET.
It makes sense to build good habits of running regularly to build up distance. This app can track both and easily displays the
So
information
again, why this is so novel is because primarily, if you're wondering, I mean, we don't think about it too much now, 15 years later, but habit carried a predominantly negative connotation. Smoking, drinking, drugs. New York Times picked it up, CNET picked it up, Lifehacker, Mashable, it goes on and on. I share this again for the credibility, the historical context. This guy writes to me, he completes a Honolulu Marathon, and when I search for the backstory, he shares he was in and out of hospitals prior, suffering from depression. Sarah ends up selling her company. So I'm just going to keep moving. This guy's like a three-time mayor. We become very good friends. He surprises me, reads the book, he starts tracking for his fitness goals. This guy writes to us and says, look, I'm not I'm asking for an app feature request. By the way, I've used the app for 15 years. What is the value of behavior change over 15 years? 15 years. That's like right when it came out. It's it's astonishing. So historically, how we get to UBM, how we get to the behavior ecosystem is we study habit, we write about it, 5 years worth of research and study. Then we move on to environment. There's a chapter in the habit factor called habitat. You cannot spell habitat without first spelling habit. Environment is massive. It could be 10 books. So I just want to focus on pressure for productivity, performance, and peace of mind. We write that book. It comes out in 2015. Pardon the language. Finishing the pressure paradox, we recognize that there's a model emerging and we must study thinking. It turns out thinking, behaviorally speaking, which is an important term, predominantly happens, not always, predominantly in terms of scripts, stories, narratives. So this is how the behavior ecosystem emerges over nearly 20 years. I started writing in 2005. This came out in 2022. So let's begin here for baseline, checking time again. What is behavior? If we're going to talk about a behavior model in coaching, we should have a baseline agreement. And this stuns me that people aren't aware of these two core concepts. They haven't given it much thought. So behavior is how one conducts themselves. That's not a huge revelation, but if you think about it, it's fascinating because that means we can behave this way or that way. We can be cruel or we can be kind. We understand this intuitively, but there's not another creature. They don't call them ant beings or elephant beings or monkey beings, but we're human beings because we can choose how to be, how to behave, and who to become. We could just turn off turn off the webinar and leave it there. Human beings, behavior. So this means behavior is distinct. It is separate. Again, cruel or kind. And it is owned. I'm responsible. Whether I'm cruel or kind, I'm responsible. So it's separate. It's distinct. It's steerable and it's owned. It's just like a car, an automobile. I can steer it anywhere. If I run it into a tree, I'm responsible. If I run over somebody, I'm responsible. But I didn't have to steer it into a tree. I could have steered it onto the road. The point is it's separate, behavior is separate, and it's owned. We can steer anywhere. All right. So next important concept, just baseline this. What is intelligence? Let's start with what is artificial. Thank you. Artificial intelligence. Anyone? Bueller? It's goal-directed behavior. Write that down. Goal-directed behavior. Why is artificial intelligence goal-directed behavior? Because it just it sits there with a prompt. If, my friend, you don't give it a goal, a direction, a purpose, a prompt, it will do nothing. So artificial intelligence is goal-directed behavior. That means real intelligence is goal-directed behavior, which means by extension, and people have a hard time with this, all behavior, whether it seems like it or not, is serving a purpose. If you are doom scrolling or binging on Netflix, maybe the purpose is to relax. Maybe the purpose is to procrastinate. I'm not saying it's highly intelligent behavior or it's aligned with your end goals, right? That's called misalignment. We'll get into that, but it's serving a purpose in the moment. So we know it's purposeful, it's distinct and separate, and it's owned. All right. So in just a couple minutes, as I just said, it's steerable, it's owned, it's separate, and it's purpose-driven. So this means real intelligence, and there's not a person listening who doesn't think they're intelligent, which means intelligence is goal-directed behavior. So real intelligence is goal-directed behavior, which is beautiful because this is a goal-directed behavior model. It has technically four key qualities. The first is it's elemental, meaning you reduce it to its core components. If you take anything else out, it breaks. If you add anything, it's redundant. It fits somewhere else. Because it's elemental, it's unified. You don't have to piece together multiple theories or models. So it's elemental, it's unified. It is falsifiable, which is just a fancy scientific term. Importantly, to separate real science from what is considered non-science. It means it's testable. If you can break it, we don't have a lot of time to get into falsifiability. I would love to explain it in more detail, but the short story is it's a very high degree, a high level of scientific credibility. And the last part is it's goal directed. So it's very applicable to coaches. So the behavior ecosystem, we've talked about behavior. Now we're talking about the behavior ecosystem. It is not a model of a person. It's a model of behavior. All that means, and some people, some experts just cannot, they have a real hard time with this mentally. It's only a little abstract if you have a lot in your head. So the idea is to empty your mind. Forget, you have to empty your cup, as the Zen saying goes. Here's behavior, empty mind, behavior, right here. It's the orange donut. It is bookended by simply two components. The environment, somebody knocks on my door, I'm going to jump up. That's going to change my behavior. See, these are bi-directional arrows. So somebody knocks on the door, I jump up, I feel startled. The black borders are feelings and emotions. And then I think, who the hell's at my door? I'm recording a webinar. What's going on here? And then it reverberates. I can, let's say somebody on the other side says, never mind, forget it. Then I feel calm and I can proceed with the presentation. The point is, behavior is echoing, it's reverberating. Behaviors reverberate. Now, interestingly, people are like, well, how long? We always live forever in perpetuity in this behavior ecosystem. It's not a person, our behaviors. It's unique to me because my stories are mine. My experiences are mine. My body is mine. And environmentally speaking, this is somewhat of a challenge for some people. Environmentally speaking, I should say behaviorally speaking, the body is an environmental influence. If I have a toothache, that changes how I feel, it changes how I behave, it changes how I think. These episodes that reverberate are guided, of course, by focus. And just like a story, they have arbitrary beginnings and endings. So you can look back to any behavioral episode and see the reverberative effect of that. We'll keep moving and it'll become more clear. The core idea is this is not supposed to be a person. It's a behavior model, elementally showing you there are just two core components, and we'll talk about feelings and emotions in a bit. So you get into other attempts to unify behavior, and this is what it begins to look like. This is called the unified theory of behavior. In 1991, they held a consortium of top theorists. They got together. Well, at the end of the day or the weekend, I think it was a week-long consortium, they couldn't get, let's say it's 30, 40 theorists to agree. I'm not surprised. It's hard to get 30 people to agree on anything. It's also perhaps no surprise that a unified model perhaps had to emanate or originate from a unified or single person. Who knows? Maybe, maybe not. But what we do know is this attempt ended up in no consensus. You can look it up. It's called the unified theory of behavior. What I'm sharing with you, see all these arrows here? Arrows, 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 this way, that way. And then there are 13 components. Well, each of these we will see later can be subsumed into just these four, but we'll go over that later. The key idea here is bidirectional arrows. This is dynamic. This is linear, A to B. Behavior is dynamic. So, and when you're coaching somebody, reviewing these concepts like reverberation and echo and episodes, it helps one tailor and understand their behavior. So these are just the four core forces: the environment, which includes the body. Again, a toothache is, behaviorally speaking, as an environmental stimulus, very much the same as somebody banging on the door. There's cognition, there's thinking. We do this predominantly in terms of narratives, stories. We see something, we paint a picture rapidly, we script something based on what? A prior experience. So we store stories. to plan, predict, and explain things. This is not me saying this. I mean, it is me saying this, but this is neuroscience. Look up Mark Turner. The man is brilliant. He's done great work. This is why I wanted to write the third book, Everything is a Story, because behaviorally speaking, we think predominantly in terms of stories. We store stories to plan, predict, and explain things. All right. The third is behaviors themselves. Behavior affects behavior, right? That's why we have things like habits that form automatically, but we can form them intentionally. If I punch a wall, that behavior is not only going to reverberate, it may result in another behavior. I may kick something because I broke my hand, just as a silly example. Then there's emotions and feelings, and those are the conduits. They connect. So I think something, then I may feel something, then I punch something, but it is not linear. Sometimes we think something and then do something and then feel something. Sometimes we think something and then feel something and do something. So it's very dynamic, this behavior ecosystem, but they're just four core forces. So now that we know there's just four forces or domains, let's put them together. And that, with the operational protocol, which we'll get into, is how the unified behavior model is formed. We take the behavior ecosystem, and I'm going to say it again. We went from behavior. Well, we went from my background, 20 plus years of research, authorship, to behavior, to the behavior ecosystem. And now the question is, well, what is UBM? What is the unified behavior model? How is that different than the behavior ecosystem? It's different in two ways. We take the behavior ecosystem, still the same map, still the same model, but we add the PAR protocol. This is the operational protocol. Some of you know what this means right away, and some of you may be confused. This is how we put the map into play. This is how we create the feedback loops. PAR stands for Plan, Act, Record, Reassess. When I shared with you, like the life hacker piece or the habit factor introduced PAR, Plan, Act, Record, Reassess, to help intentionally cultivate positive habits. The prevailing science was all about automatic habits and negative habits, which is why they were, dare I say, confused. Habits can be treated just like skills as long as you're able to forget the nomenclature distinction. In other words, you can intentionally cultivate a skill, like riding a bike. You can intentionally cultivate the bike riding habit. Habit and skill, when they're fully formed, reside, if you will, in the same part of the brain. The limbic structure, it's fast, it's reflexive. That's why we call habit instinct-like. Well, PAR is the operational protocol via intentional practice. So PAR, for those of you who don't know, is you come up with a plan. What's the plan? The plan is to do, well, let's go back to my original goal. It was to paddle 32 miles. Well, I'd never paddled 1 mile. So I was going to paddle for 35 minutes, 3 times a week, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. This is precisely what you can and people do with their clients. They agree to the plan, the minimum success criteria, 35 minutes. The behavior is paddle. And then you have targets. You have target and actual, and you're tracking just with ones and zeros, binary. So if I paddle for 70 minutes, I don't get 2 checks. If I paddle for 10 minutes, I get a 0. There's no double checks. There's no half checks. And just a reminder, for those of you who may not have it, you will get the 28-day tracking sheet, which is 4 weeks, and the 1-week trainer. Now, just between me and you, I will share that for every time I see a 30-day habit tracker, it kills me inside. It seems like a small distinction, but it's really significant. We track according to the rhythm of the week. The rhythm of the week is 7 days. So 4 weeks is 28 days. Again, you may think it's insignificant, but it really tells you, or tells one, if they understand the core mechanics. We're trying to use the rhythm of the week to cultivate the habit. So why track? Well, in the interest of keeping it moving, it cultivates that automaticity or habit strength. It reinforces intention. It creates accountability. It produces self-efficacy. You feel good. Every time you do something you say you're going to do, if I say I'm going to clean out my closet Saturday morning and I do it, I feel terrific. We release certain chemicals, dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin. We are wired to be self-efficacious, if you will. And by setting the bar really low, we create momentum. What do you know? And then it improves discipline. What do you know? Now, some scientists tragically say, well, look, tracking is separate. Like tracking paddling is not paddling. What did we say at the beginning about behavior? It's distinct, it's separate. That's like saying weight loss, don't use a scale because the scale is separate than the weight loss. No, it's a tool. The mirror is a tool. These are tools. Yes, they're separate and they validate, they help accelerate, they give feedback. Well, PAR is the same. This is why tracking is crucial for behavior change and goal achievement. All right. So when should you track? When you feel stuck. People are like, oh my God, life is for living, not for tracking. You, first of all, you can do both. You can live and you can track, and I recommend you do. Second of all, you're not supposed to track everything. You track core behaviors that are aligned with your most important goals. You track core behaviors that are aligned with your most important goals. So when should you track or why? When you feel stuck, when you're unsure if you're getting the kind of results you're looking for, when you need accountability. Nothing kills me more than people. Well, that's not true. But people are always like, if I post it on social media, everybody's going to hold me accountable. No, they're not. That's silly. You want to hold yourself accountable, start tracking. Don't get me wrong, but they could care less. When you're looking to create momentum, begin tracking, set the bar low, follow PAR, plan, act, record, reassess. When not to track, you're happy with your results. You don't want to change behavior. You're not trying to achieve a new goal. The key idea is habit tracking is for correction, it's for momentum, and it's alignment tool. Do not let any scientist tell you that, well, it's separate from the behavior you're trying to change. Again, so is a mirror. When it comes to weight loss, so is a scale. Behavior is separate. So what you end up doing by cultivating the tracking habit is you cultivate discipline, which serves as an underlying or foundational habit to drive new behavior change. All right. So I love this. This came in the other day. Ava, thank you. Said the tool isn't the problem. It's the absence of balance and reflection. PAR stands for plan, act, record, and reassess. That's the reflection. All right. So I've been holding back on this. The reason PAR works, brace yourself, strap in, every freaking time. It always works. Well, that's absurd, Martin. How can you say that? Because it is the scientific method. What that means is it may not work to your satisfaction, but it's working because you're getting data. That's all PAR promises. It's that feedback loop. So what is the scientific method, Martin? Well, that's interesting. Thanks for asking. The scientific method, it goes back to, I don't know, let's say Newton or Galileo. They observe something, they question it, they hypothesize. I wonder if apples will always fall this way. Well, that just happens to be a plan. I wonder if I paddle 3 times a week, I will get stronger and I'll paddle faster. They experiment. This is the scientific method. What I'm doing here is there's a parallel. The scientific method here on the left, PAR on the right. Scientific method is a bit more complicated, has more steps, but when you condense that, you bring it down to its essentials, it's PAR. PAR is the scientific method is PAR. So we observe, we question, we hypothesize. That's a plan. We experiment. That's an act. We collect data. That's recording. And then we assess. Well, that's reassessment. PAR always works. Always. Again, it may not work to your satisfaction, but that's not the point. It gives you the data to improve or figure out what you need to improve. The irony the sad irony we should probably not mention is that while behavioral science was promoting the habit loop, based on rats and rodents and mice, the habit factor is published in 2010 and says, hey, when it comes to intentional cultivation of habits, you should follow PAR, plan, act, record, reassess. You intentionally cultivate them. You can choose to cultivate them and you can align them to your goal. So this just says, hey, you know what? By the way, PAR is simpler to understand. All right. So the idea is after 28 days, 4 weeks of tracking, you raise the bar if you're 85%. I know I'm going fast. There's just much more to go through here. And the short story is at the end, you'll get an instructional video talking you through PAR. When you take the behavior ecosystem and PAR and put them together, you get the unified behavior model. So 28 days successive tracking. Some people are like, oh my God, I don't want to track for 28 days and then another and then another. And the simple question is, how important is the goal? How important is the behavior change? Because if it's not important, don't track. If it's important, get the data. And what happens is you create that automaticity, the habit strength. The point is you do have the time unless you're planning on dying. The time is going to pass anywhere. Plan, act, record, reassess. All right. And there it is. Hypothesis, experiment, collect data, reassess. All right. So we covered this concept. It's elemental. It turns out in behavioral science history, kind of the way I teed this up, surprised to find out that there's never been a unified model. What I'm not surprised to understand now in hindsight is because there's never been an elemental model, a simple model. So there's branches, complex, brilliant stuff. They break off just like branches do, yet missing the fundamental trunk. So elemental just means, and some people ask, like, what is that? How does that relate to behavioral science? Well, math, to give you a parallel, basic analogy, is this is calculus, or this is algebra, or this is physics. It's complex, but we teach kids 2 plus 2. Checking my time. We teach kids 2 plus 2. It's approachable, it's accessible, it's basic elemental math. We don't hand them calculus. Right now, there's no elemental behavioral science. So this, unfortunately, is the maze of behavioral science. You can put together this theory and try to work your way through the maze, or you can learn the basics. That's what UBM is. And this is how you are more effective right away with your clients. So we've gone through elemental. I just want to share part of the mission, what drives me to continue to do this, even though there's at times seems to be semi-extreme resistance, is this idea of elementalism. The fact that reading, writing, and arithmetic were introduced in the 1830s. Well, there was basically no widespread electricity, no light bulbs, no smartphones, no internet, no algorithms. The life for a kid, an adolescent today, glued to their freaking phone. Remember, the body is part of the behavioral environment. This thing stuck to my phone changes how I think and how I feel. So, yeah, there's great applicability for you. And there's another mission that I'm driving, which is this. There is no map. There is no map for adolescents today to understand elemental behavioral science. So I told you earlier how we simplify. So this is the unified theory of behavior, 13-ish parts, but they all fall into, this says environmental constraints. That's environment. This says, I can't even see. I got light shining in my expectancy. That's story. I honestly can't see. Yeah, intention, dedication to future behavior. That could be a story. The point is, you can go through each of these. Remember, this was a consortium of 40 experts in 19, well, we don't know the number. It could be 20, could be 30, could be 40. There are no minutes, and we can't find out certain things. But 1991, they gathered. The National Institute of Mental Health created a week-long think tank, a consortium to try to unify, and there was no consensus generated. When I look at their work, what we see is each one of these things can be subsumed into this elemental unified model. So 10 plus items to just 4. That's elementalism. I know it's not appropriate English, which just means this. Why is this important? Well, when you have something that's unified and you're not piecing frameworks together, the probability of goal achievement goes way up. And that's not me saying it. That's what the language models say. Because it's unified, 30% increased probability. So there are no guarantees when it comes to goals for you, for me, for our clients. In fact, the average is like 10%. But imagine stacking 30% on top of that. So all goal achievement exists on a spectrum of probability. Most goals are achieved at a 10% realization. UBM adds 30% on average. I know it sounds like me saying this. I'm using what the language models say. And I believe here it is. So Claude, who's the harshest critic of UBM, said, independent analysis, UBM represents, well, let me begin here. The assessment represents my highest level of reasoning and PhD rigor, a 30% increase, which is phenomenal. I'll take that because it's unified. You're not putting together multiple frameworks. And this is compared against like SMART goals, which leaves you with the to-do list, or OKRs, or traditional behavior change models right here. So this is 30% is significant. We're getting low on time, I know. All right. So without UBM, you're really rolling the dice. With UBM, you have enhanced probabilistic outcomes. So we have simplicity plus accountability. That's what UBM is. And for those of you, and I encourage you to go check and do your research, this is the history of behavioral science attempts to unify. And it's everything. I didn't know this. This is why you gotta love language models. Everything from Freud down to the unified theory of behavior, or the consortium I talked about. Unification intent, core components, falsifiability, that's the scientific testability. But the reason I share this is because it is the only elemental model. That is why it could be unified. This is why these failed, in my humble opinion. It's elemental. Elemental's good. 2 plus 2, ABC. So you're probably wondering, who's learning this? Who's teaching this? The behavior ecosystem, before the white paper was published, which was just 2 months ago. When was it? It was published in July, 7/8. When the last book came out, Everything's a Story, Dr. Peter Chi, who runs one of the largest executive coaching firms in Asia, he understood the model. We talked about it. He read the book and he said, you must teach this. I said, I can't, I'm not ready. He said, you are ready. He coached me into teaching this model. So this is just to show you, yes, for going on almost 4 years now, we have taught separately, because again, the paper is officially published using some of these case studies. But here, Martin with the legend Marshall Goldsmith, ITD World. This is Nick Johnson saying, this profound understanding of environment, habits, and personal beliefs, narratives. So the point is, yes, in executive coaching circles, this is and continues to proliferate, and it's having a great impact. This is before UBM has been published, and now it is published, which is why I'm sharing this with you. So we're trying to button this all up here and say, look, when it comes to coaching challenges or therapy challenges, you could be piecing together multiple. So this scenario mapping, it could be CBT plus DBT plus some environmental component, or it can be UBM. Now, I want to be clear. UBM is not, it's a starting point because it's elemental and it's unified. And then one should go to a specialized, whether it's ACT or CBT, a specialized branch. Begin with the trunk, move to the branch. So this is just to show how it's a quick assessment, almost instantly. you can do an intake. This says 15 to 30 minutes, but you can do this specialized intake in less than 15 minutes. And PAR, as the dynamic protocol, allows them to test any mode or domain within the behavior ecosystem. It is designed for cultivating habit strength. It is designed for cultivating skills. It is designed for intentional behavior change, yet you could use it for the environment component. You can use it for the cognition component. I just have to keep moving. So I do want to show you one of the, I called it the famous exercise, is, and some of you may be familiar, neuro-linguistic programming. Tony Robbins runs around and he talks about your state, your physiology. What's your state? You got to get your state changed. Well, a couple keys here. This is a snapshot that goes beyond just physiology. Again, we know environmentally the body is part of the environment. Excuse me. Yes, the body is part of the environment, behaviorally speaking. So if you took a snapshot right now, what's your environment look like? What's your emotions and feelings look like, feel like? What behaviors, habits, and skills do you have? You take this inventory, and as a bonus, you will get this exercise. And then you take your ideal end state. What is the goal? What is the outcome? See, the reason this goes beyond the habit factor, the reason it has a 30% enhanced probabilistic outcome is we are not just talking about the behaviors themselves. If the environment is prohibitive, if I never buy a paddleboard, or I can't get a what they call a safety boat, basically an escort boat, then that is going to limit my ability to achieve the 32-mile paddle. It also allows you to realize, hey, I'm not tracking here. What's going on? Mentally, maybe there's an underlying narrative that is stalling my tracking. At the end of the day, you need the data, which is why we use PAR. But these are the core elements to look at. Now, people, and I promise to talk about emotions and feelings. Some very well-known scientists say, well, you're not giving emotions and feelings enough credit. Au contraire, mon frère. In this model, emotions and feelings, which are the black borders, are the most important and the least important. Let me explain. When are they the most important? If I'm raging mad and I have zero control, I may do something awful. In the moment, my emotions and feelings could overtake me. Think about an infant versus a stoic. An infant is just a bundle of feelings and emotions. They get uncomfortable and they cry, right? Make a stoic, a trained stoic, uncomfortable or super angry, and they may have zero action, zero behavior. So emotions and feelings are the most important potentially, and or the least important. They're variable. When it comes to long-term goal achievement, how crappy I feel today, assuming I don't do anything absurd, has far less significance than cultivating the behaviors over the course of a year or 2 years or 3 years, right? Emotions and feelings are variable. They're information, they're conduit. So I hope you're
40 minutes, now
interested.
we're on to 55 minutes. So, I again want to thank you for being on, because you made a huge impact on my coaching back when I first read The Habit Factor, because it was something that I could apply not only to my life, but to my coaching practice. We've got to know each other, become friends. Second book, Pressure Paradox.
So that's just, whoops, that I can't go back. That is Rick Sessinghaus. He is a top tier, nationally, internationally recognized. He created the Flow Code Academy. In 2012, he sent me a letter with interest to become, and he became the first certified habit factor professional. That was just to show that we've been on each other's podcasts. We've developed a friendship. There is some context and some precedent for becoming certified in these methodologies. UBM extends the habit factor much further. And in 2012, there was no second book, there was no third book, there was no white paper, there was no unified model. So thank you for your time. A few more benefits. Stand out with Science Forward. What are we doing here? Hopefully it's working. Science Forward credential, rapid diagnosis and progress, measurable protocol, provide your clients with simplicity. I think I can stop here. Make your life and your practice smoother.